We were told that growth was everything. That prosperity was proof of progress. That the more we built, consumed, and expanded, the better our world would become. But what if that very belief, the pursuit of endless prosperity, is the reason everything begins to crumble? History doesn't lie. Every great civilization that rose to unimaginable wealth, eventually drowned in the weight of its own success. What if prosperity itself, not poverty, not war but prosperity, became the seed of our collapse? Long before skyscrapers pierced the sky, the ancients built empires on the same dream, the dream of prosperity. In ancient Rome, prosperity was a symbol of divine favor. The empire stretched across continents. Gold flowed through the streets. Citizens bathed in marble pools while slaves toiled in the fields. But behind the luxury was a hidden decay. The Roman economy relied on conquest, plundering the wealth of others to sustain its own. And when there was no one left to conquer, Rome began to rot from within. Seneca, the Roman philosopher, once warned, "We suffer more from imagination than from reality." Rome imagined that its prosperity was eternal. It built monuments to itself but forgot the principles that once made it strong: discipline, duty, and balance. And as history would prove, when prosperity becomes the goal instead of the outcome of wisdom, decline is inevitable. Look closely, and you'll see the same story again and again. The Mesopotamians, inventors of the first cities, built irrigation systems so advanced that they transformed deserts into farmland. Prosperity followed. Populations grew. Cities expanded. But over time, their success became their weakness. The land was overfarmed. The rivers turned salty. Crops died. Cities that once fed thousands became ghost towns buried under sand. The Mayans built great temples and cities deep within the jungle, an empire of art, astronomy, and mathematics. But prosperity drove overpopulation. Forests were cleared. Soil eroded. Famine followed. The Chinese Tang dynasty, once called the Golden Age, flourished with trade, poetry, and invention until the wealth gap grew too wide, corruption took root, and rebellion tore the empire apart. Each thought they were different. Each thought their prosperity would last. Each collapsed under the weight of its own success. It's as if prosperity itself carries a hidden curse, a slow, invisible poison that seeps in when everything seems perfect. Fast forward to the modern age. We pride ourselves on having learned from history, yet our economic systems are built on the same fragile idea: growth without limits. After World War II, the world rebuilt under a new order fueled by production, consumption, and credit. The Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944 tied global currencies to the US dollar. America's factories roared to life. The middle class was born. Prosperity seemed endless. But in 1971, when President Richard Nixon ended the gold standard, the world entered a new era. Money itself became an idea, not a physical thing. We began printing value out of thin air, borrowing from the future to sustain the present. And from that moment on, the illusion of prosperity grew stronger, and more dangerous. The global economy became addicted to growth at all costs. Governments borrowed. Corporations expanded. Consumers spent. The cycle spun faster and faster until debt became the foundation of prosperity itself. But economics is only half the story. The deeper decay begins inside us, in the human mind. When a society becomes prosperous, something subtle happens: the values that created that prosperity begin to fade. In scarcity, people cooperate. In comfort, they compete. In struggle, they invent. In luxury, they consume. In hardship, they seek meaning. In abundance, they seek distraction. It's not that prosperity is evil, it's that comfort dulls the instincts that survival once sharpened. Psychologists call it the hedonic treadmill. No matter how much we achieve, we adapt and crave more. And in nations, this craving turns into overproduction, overconsumption, and overconfidence, the very forces that precede collapse. We mock the decadence of Rome. But look closer, and you'll see, we are Rome. Every system, biological, social, or economic, has a point of balance. When growth exceeds that balance, collapse is not a failure. It's a correction. Consider the 2008 financial crisis. It wasn't caused by poverty, it was caused by too much prosperity built on illusion. Too many loans, too much confidence, too much belief that housing prices could only go up. The system didn't crash because people were poor. It crashed because they believed they were rich. And yet, instead of rethinking the system, we simply rebuilt it, bigger. Trillions were printed. Markets recovered. But the underlying addiction, the worship of endless growth, never went away. The historian Sir John Glubb once studied dozens of fallen civilizations from Babylon to Byzantium. He found that each empire lasted roughly 250 years, and every single one followed the same stages, from pioneers rightward arrow to conquest rightward arrow to commerce rightward arrow to affluence rightward arrow to intellect rightward arrow and finally, to decay. And what marks that final stage? A loss of courage. A loss of purpose. A loss of moral will. The people stop believing in something greater than themselves. In the West today, we see declining birth rates, political polarization, record debt, and rising mental illness, all symptoms of a civilization drowning in its own success. It's not the barbarians at the gates that destroy empires. It's the comfort inside the walls. Collapse isn't always a war or a sudden disaster. Sometimes, it's silent, slow, invisible. It begins when trust fades. When institutions lose legitimacy. When money no longer represents value, but belief. And when belief dies, so does the system. Global debt now exceeds $315 trillion, more than 3x the world's GDP. 60% of young people in developed nations believe they will be poorer than their parents. Loneliness has become a public health crisis, even as we are more connected than ever. Prosperity promised happiness, yet anxiety, depression, and despair have reached record highs. We gained the world, but lost our souls in the process. Yet history also shows us something else: collapse is not the end. It's renewal in disguise. When Rome fell, Europe eventually gave birth to the Renaissance. When the Great Depression shattered economies, new systems of social welfare and innovation emerged. Every collapse clears the ground for something new if we have the courage to rebuild differently. The question is, will we learn this time? Because our tools are greater than ever before. We have knowledge, technology, and communication beyond anything ancient civilizations could dream of. But our challenge is not external, it's spiritual. Can we redefine prosperity not as endless consumption, but as enduring balance? To survive our own success, we must remember what prosperity truly is. It is not luxury. It is not comfort. It is not accumulation. True prosperity is resilience. The ability to endure. To adapt. To sacrifice today so that tomorrow still exists. In ancient times, leaders built monuments to their glory. Today, our monuments are digital data, markets, algorithms. But the principle remains the same: without humility, even the mightiest structures will fall. We can no longer afford to chase infinite growth on a finite planet. Because what begins as prosperity, eventually becomes decay if left unchecked. Growth must serve life, not replace it. An economy that grows while the people within it shrink in health, hope, and purpose is not progress. It's decline disguised as success. Comfort is the enemy of strength. Every generation must face challenge, not because suffering is noble, but because without struggle, we forget how to endure. Prosperity should empower, not weaken. Prosperity must be measured in meaning. Wealth is a tool. Meaning is a compass. A society obsessed with profit but void of purpose will always consume itself. The civilizations that lasted did so not because they were the richest, but because they remembered what mattered. Every generation faces its test. Ours is not war. It's not famine. It's not conquest. It's the test of abundance. Can we remain wise when we have everything? Can we remain humble when we feel invincible? Can we protect what truly matters when the illusion of more calls us louder than ever? The fall of Rome, the collapse of the Mayans, the downfall of great empires all whisper the same truth. What we refuse to balance, life will balance for us. And that balance always comes whether we are ready or not. If this story made you think, if it made you question what prosperity really means, then you're part of a new conversation. A conversation about meaning over money. Purpose over profit. Balance over blind growth. Because the next chapter of civilization will be written by those who learn not from prosperity's promises, but from its consequences. The future doesn't collapse, it evolves.